Howdy, howdy, everyone. Chris here, and welcome back to Garage Noise. On the last episode, we repaired the metal on these two doors. We straightened it out and got it all prepared for some body filler. And today, we're going to apply that body filler, block it straight. I'm going to share with you exactly how to do it, and then we're going to get it into primer and ready for paint. Let's get in the garage and make some noise. I've got the first coat of filler applied, and I'm going over it with a long block and some 36 grit sandpaper. The main purpose of the first coat of filler is to fill in all those low areas and just kind of start shaping it. Then I'm going to tap down any high spots that I feel. So you want to look for any of those high spots because we want to have those knocked down before we put another coat of filler on it. I'm going to take my Roberlo sander with some 80 grit sandpaper and machine sand around this repair area. And then we laid another coat of filler over that front door. I'll let this body filler cure. We're going to put a little bit of heat on it to speed that up, and then we'll block over it with some 36 grit sandpaper and lay one more coat of filler over this entire repair area. Now, I went ahead and taped off the jamb so I can lay this filler over both doors, and then we'll clean up the gap after we lay the filler. Once this filler has cured, that's when we're really going to start straightening out these panels by blocking it. Now, you could use a pneumatic sander of some kind like a mud hog or an inline sander. Those make quick work of this body filler. I opted just to go with the longboard and some coarse 36 grit sandpaper to start to straighten this out. Now, I'm going to use a crosshatch or X pattern to get this panel straight. You want to use as long of strokes as possible and cover as much area as possible to flatten this out. As we start to get this body filler cut, we're exposing some low areas. Now we want to try and block those areas out, so we're blocking down to those low areas. If we start to hit bare metal, then we need to evaluate that and see if it's something that needs to be tapped down, or are we going to need some more filler to flatten it out. Now that I got a good feel for how this repair is shaping up, I'm going to break out my Roberlo sander, and that'll just be a little bit quicker in knocking down some of these high areas and blocking this panel out straight. As we get these panels blocked out, it becomes a little bit more difficult to recognize the high and low areas. So what we're going to use is a dry guide coat, and we're going to wipe it over both of these panels, and then we'll block it with some 80 grit sandpaper on the long block, and that'll help show us some of the low areas that we need to address. Okay, now I'm using my Mirka long block with the vacuum system. I've got some 80 grit sandpaper on this block, and I'm blocking in the crosshatch pattern to get this straight. And you can see where those low areas are as I block. So in the front part of that rear door, there's a little bit of low area, and you can start to see how this straightens out and how the guide coat works, so you can see when this panel is flat. So there's a few things to look out for when you're blocking to know when this panel is straight or when you need to apply some more filler or knock down some high spots. If you start to break through that filler into bare metal, and you can see here in the center of that door is some bare metal. I've sanded down to it. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go away from that section, and I'm going to block some other areas. I won't block over that bare metal anymore because I know that's either a high spot or there's low areas around it. So it could either need some more filler or to tap down that high spot and then apply some more filler. So keep that in mind when you're blocking, trying to straighten your panel. Look for any high areas, bare metal, or low areas that need to be filled. As I'm blocking this lower section, you can see how the guide coat works, and right there in the center of this page, you can see there's a low area, and I know that because the guide coat is sitting in that area. So I can either block down to that if there's enough material there to block down to it, or it may need another skim coat of filler over that area. As I'm blocking this panel straight and we're getting closer to it being straight, you're gonna see me more and more feel over this panel, feeling for any high areas or any low areas or any waves in this panel, and where I need to do a little bit more blocking or where I might need to apply some more filler. Right here, I notice there's a little bare metal showing through. That's probably from one of my pulls with my G90E. So I wanted to tap that down. I don't want that to affect my blocking in that area. So once I tap it down, now I can block down to it again and remove some of those low areas that are around it. Now I'm going to use some 220 on the orbital sander and start cleaning up some of those 30 grit scratches and 80 grit scratches and kind of refining those down to a 220 grit scratch, sanding the paint and feather edging out the paint in preparation for primer. Now I filled in the last remaining dents on the rear part of this door, and then we're going to fill in the front part of this door with some polyester glazing putty. I just needed a thin coat to build it up there so I can block it flat so it meets nicely up with the edge of that door. Okay, so I'm going to share with you how to create a body line. Here we have a dent that was right on this body line. We pulled the dent out, we filled it. This is a little bit of glaze here that we're using. So in order to get this body line straight, what I like to do is I take a tool such as this. This is an inexpensive tool you can get on Amazon. I've got a link in the description if it's something you're interested in. You know where the body line's good. Right here, we know that body line is accurate. We adjust it so that pencil is right on the body line. And then we're able to use this to go right down where that body line should be. Okay, so now what I can do is I can take a piece of 3/4 inch tape and I'm gonna run it right, if it'll stick, right along that pencil mark. And this is just a guide, we'll refine it later, but we're gonna run it right along that pencil mark. Now I have an idea. I can take my block here. I've just got some 220 on a soft block so it moves with the, see, this is a flexible block and it'll move with the contours of this panel. And then I can block right up to that tape without messing up that line. Now I can flip the tape to the other side and go right on the other side of that pencil mark and then sand the door edge. Now I've got a small block and I don't want to use a large block because I have the rest of this panel straight, but I have a little wave up top here that I felt that I want to block out. So as I'm feeling it and blocking it, I can refine where I'm blocking with that small block and get that knocked out. Now we need to prepare these panels for primer. So what I'm going to do is I've got my orbital sander with an interface pad, which is a soft foam pad, and I've got some 600 grit sandpaper on it. We're going to machine sand around this repair area, and we could even do the entire doors if we wanted to, because we're going to use 600 when we blend, and when we blend the color and we put clear over any areas that we did not paint. I'll use my eraser wheel and drill to remove this emblem adhesive. We want to make sure this is nice and clean before we start painting, and white can be a bear. It tends to hide dirt, so make sure that there's no streaks before you start painting and clearing. Now I want to tape off this jam. I don't want any overspray going inside the jamb, but I do want some primer on the edge of this door. So we're back taping it, and then we'll back tape the other door. So some primer will get over that edge, but it's not going to go inside the jamb and create a problem. Now we're just going to finish up masking it off for primer. We want to tape off the bottom of these doors. We don't want any primer underneath that molding or getting on any unsanded paint area. And then we'll use some plastic to tape off the top, just so we don't get any overspray on the rest of this vehicle. And we'll be using low pressure when we primer this. You don't need to use a ton of pressure when you're priming. You don't want a bunch of overspray going everywhere. But everything now is properly sanded, and it's ready for some 2K urethane primer, and that's what we're going to use today. We're going to use the Roberlo ME1. It's a high build 2K primer, along with a 3M performance gun with a 1.4 tip. I'm going to have my volume turned 2 to 3 turns out. My fan pattern is going to be wide open, and the air pressure I'll run is probably around 16 PSI on the air pressure, very low. And then we'll just get 2 good coats of urethane primer on this. We want to let it flash off about 10 to 15 minutes in between coats. I hope you enjoyed this video and found the information useful for your project. And if you did and want to help support the channel, all you have to do is like this video, subscribe, and check out my links down in the description. Now, next episode, we're going to paint this vehicle. I'll walk you step by step through the process so you can get a great result on your vehicle. But you don't have to wait. If you want to learn more about paint and body repair, check out one of these videos now. I appreciate each and every one of you watching. We'll see you next time on Garage Noise.